Good.
Uh, so, hello everyone. So, this is Otto from Growing the Commons, and today I'll be interviewing Nick Weir from the Open Food Network, which you can find at openfoodnetwork.org.uk. It's really great stuff. You should absolutely go check out that website. So, let's get into it. Nick, and great to chat with you.
Yeah, good
We'll
morning.
start with some broader questions about what you're doing exactly and why it's a good idea. So I want to talk about why you're doing it to start. So what problem are you trying to solve and what's your motivation here?
Okay, so it's pretty simple. I'm part of a global community of farmers, growers, and community food enterprises of many different kinds, with a common belief that mainstream global food systems are broken and that we need to rebuild them from the bottom up. They're broken mainly because there is an imbalance of power and control in the food systems. A small number of large retailers controlling the distribution of food, small number of seed companies, small number of ag tech, small number of landowners. The whole system is very unstable and top heavy, and starting to collapse. And over the last 12 years, this global community has been building a piece of open source software that provides an alternative.
Okay, brilliant. I know from my perspective, I'm seeing the exact same problems that you are, and I'm sure a lot of people who are involved in the food production, agriculture, are also aware of these. So, what is your philosophy or your approach to this problem? Like, is there a sense of urgency, or maybe you mentioned community and trying to build networks? So, I was
Yeah.
just wondering if you could reflect on that aspect.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, there is. I see. I feel a strong sense of urgency, but over the 12 years that I've been involved with this process, I've realized that my urgency doesn't necessarily translate to the change in the food system. Um, the change in the food system relates to the need, and at the moment, the mainstream system is propped up enough and marketed heavily enough that there is no mainstream perception of need. Apart from when we have crises like the COVID crisis, when suddenly the food distribution systems were not working and we had shortages in supermarkets, and turnover through the Open Food Network went up by 850% in 7 weeks during lockdown.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that sort of thing is interesting. I think there have been other projects that have a sense of urgency, and they also noticed that during COVID, when supply chains fell apart,
mm,
um, people started flocking to them. I think the Many Trees project, I think it's over in the States, which are trying to grow fruit trees. They saw a bunch more people getting
mm,
interested. I think they're even founded in COVID, where there's an underlying sense of urgency, and then one thing goes wrong, and then they're going, "We need to do something now."
yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of keeping people in that state of urgency, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when financial pressures are so strong and the supermarkets can undercut all local food systems because of their economies of scale and and mainly because of their unfairness. The fact that they're exploiting farmers and growers in poor countries and using vast amounts of fossil fuel to move food around the planet, which makes it cheaper. And if people are struggling economically, then they will have to go for cheaper food.
Yeah, that's a big problem with food systems. Is yeah, a lot of these foods are very cheap
Yeah.
because of the reasons you mentioned, but pushing the prices up to pay people fairly, it becomes a problem because of the
Hmm.
broader economic system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll get into what you're doing exactly, just so you can provide where do you fit in this whole complicated ecosystem. So what are you doing exactly, and
Okay.
how do you think it addresses the very complicated problem that you've brought up?
Okay. So the first thing we did was to start to build this open source e-commerce platform that allows farmers and growers and food producers of every kind to connect their produce and to sell their produce to the eaters and the buyers. So we're building short food supply networks that enable local food systems to develop such that the people who need to eat the food can buy it from people locally who are producing that food and build a strong local economy. The software does that very well. It's open source, which means that it's in common ownership, and it also means that people all over the world are contributing ideas and suggestions to it. The software is deployed in 21, 22 countries, and increasing all the time. And every week there is an update to the software. So as people say, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? The software then improves and improves and improves. And because it's open source, ideas generated in any one country will be added to the common code base so that we all benefit from each other's ideas. So that's the first thing that's happening. People connecting to their local farmers and growers, either directly by buying directly from the farm or through what we call food hubs. And a hub brings together multiple producers under a single online shopfront and then takes orders from eaters and buyers. The software then sends purchase orders to each of the producers. The hub aggregates the produce and then delivers it to the eaters and the buyers. So that's happening and steadily growing and is very effective. But the most important thing about the Open Food Network for me is the knowledge base. The fact that people using this platform have incredibly creative and innovative ideas about how to build local food systems adapted to their local area. And then they share that knowledge. So we have lots of case studies, lots of webinars, lots of resources on our website, which are 12 years of experience of building local food systems. And that knowledge base, I believe, is as important as the software in terms of a dispersed global community of local activists building better food systems.
So it's something that's definitely evolved over the past 12 years as people bring in their own perspectives and ideas. I was just wondering if we could go back to the very start 12 years ago and where did that original idea come from? And what motivated you, but also how far have you departed from that as you've been guided along the way by various other people coming in and maybe other countries operating with the same software?
Yeah. Okay, so going back to the beginning, the two founders of the Open Food Network, two women who worked for the Australian government in food policy, Kirsten Larson and Serenity Hill. They became increasingly disillusioned with mainstream food policy and had this idea of why not build something from the bottom up. They started this software way back 12 years ago. We had a similar idea in the UK, but not anything like as big. We were just looking to fix a small local food system problem. We had also developed some similar software, but ours was nothing like as good as the Open Food Network, and ours became out of date quite quickly. Developing software is really expensive, so we then went looking for funding to improve our software. And somebody said to us, "Why don't you talk to these guys in Australia? They've got this idea, this concept, this platform that's already there." So we brought the platform, the software to the UK about 10 years ago, and it's grown ever since then. It evolves every time a new country deploys it because each country has slightly different cultures, slightly different ways of working, slightly different ways of using the software. So an example is in the UK now, we've just got into public procurement, selling it to schools and hospitals, aggregating produce from multiple small-scale agroecological producers, and then bringing it together with the hub having a contract with the large-scale buyer. And that has evolving the software. And now in Canada and France and Spain and Australia, that is now starting to happen. This whole public procurement thing is starting to happen. There's a big chunk of funding just come into OFN Canada and OFN Australia for user experience improvements to the software, and we will all benefit from that improved UX.
Oh, brilliant. How's the response been for all these different groups, people using the website, maybe the difference between different farms who are selling, but also individuals versus the public procurement in different countries? Have you noticed any differences? Have you had successes in people who are initially skeptical and getting them excited about the idea and at least give it a try?
Yeah. It does entirely grow by word of mouth. So we have very little budget for marketing, and it is just people who use the software and find it helpful. And once you start to build these systems, once you start to have even a single producer who's starting to sell direct to the public, that other producers start to notice that's working, and they then start to work together, and they will start to sell each other's produce. They will develop what we call producer hubs, which is a producer selling their own produce and also selling from other local farms and growers locally. So it does grow organically. In terms of the use of the software, there are many other platforms that do similar things to the Open Food Network, but almost all of them are proprietary, which means they're owned and controlled by an individual or by a corporation. And as much as that individual might be well motivated, they may well sell their business. They're open to takeover. They will at some point die, and somebody will take over that business. There is no security in terms of ownership of that software. And we believe if we're going to build a better food system, it needs to be built on fundamentally different ownership and control models. So a lot of the other software out there is venture capital funded, proprietary software that is looking for a return on capital. There is very little, there are very small margins in the food businesses. The farmers and growers are on very tight margins. They can't afford to pay for expensive software. So the software we're producing is not as glitzy and not as shiny as the proprietary software. But people like the ethics. They like the fact that they're investing in a platform that is going to be there in perpetuity forever for the users. So yeah, it works on an ethical basis.
So the fact that it's open source and kind of becomes a commonly owned or common project is the draw for a lot of sellers and buyers. They have other options, but if they don't have that ethical agreement, then they go to the Open Food Network. Is that kind of how it's been working out?
That seems to be the case for a lot of the enlightened users. A lot of farmers and growers don't really get technology. They don't really understand what's the difference in open source and proprietary. Let's just go for the cheapest. Let's just go for the one that's easiest or whatever. But I think over time, as these proprietary systems come and go, because venture capital funders want a return on their capital. If they're not getting that, they will pull the plug on the funding. So a lot of the proprietary software doesn't last very long. But over time, over the 12 years, we have seen a lot of people coming to us because the software is still there after 12 years and still getting better, and B, because it is cost effective. And with the Open Food Network, there is a way of using the platform for free until your turnover goes over £500 a month. So when you're a small scale grower, you can experiment with the software without any financial outlay at all.
That's brilliant. Apart from the software, you mentioned procurement hubs. Your website has things about food hubs. Do you mind just going into that a bit? If that's a physical presence, if that's tying into the website, or if that's something that's even led by the users of the website?
Yeah, every hub is different. So some of them are farmers markets, real life farmers markets that have an online version of their farmers market, so people can pre-order produce from the market. People who can't get to the market can put an online order in, and that kind of thing. Some of them are entirely virtual farmers markets where there is no physical presence. There is an online shop front where people can shop, and then there'll be either a warehouse or a farmer's barn or a school hall that's used once a week for 2 or 3 hours, where all the produce is delivered to that physical location, sorted into boxes, and then collected from pickup points or delivery options. Some of them are food banks distributing surplus food to people in food poverty, community larders, food co-ops and buying groups who are buying bulk produce from wholesalers, 25 kilo sacks of rice at wholesale price, and then split up and divided amongst their members. There's multiple different ways of using the software, but the procurement option has one of those hubs, normally with some kind of permanent physical presence, because they're normally quite big hubs, because they're having to process big quantities. Imagine a school wanting 100 kilos of carrots a week, a hospital wanting 500 kilos of potatoes a week. This produce needs to be sourced from multiple different small scale producers, aggregated together and then shipped to the buyer. So yeah, they vary massively. The website has got lots of different case studies showing how these different hubs work.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think is a virtue of the commoning and the very local scale it can manifest in is that capacity to have these small scale experiments and be very adaptable to circumstances rather than having a top down prescriptive, here's what you're supposed to do. And if it doesn't work, then you're just doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So it's great to see that in action and have all these different hubs do different things depending on what works for them and their particular needs and circumstances.
Yeah,
Um,
and then sharing that knowledge. This worked for us. Why don't you try it? This didn't work for us. So, make sure you don't make that same mistake. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing as well.
yeah, that knowledge sharing, especially saying this didn't work for us, because a lot of time people don't talk about that, and then people make the same mistakes on repeat, don't they?
Yeah. But given that it's not for profit and cooperative and open source, people are happy to talk about their mistakes. It's great. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So I'll go a bit more into the specifics here, mostly for listeners who maybe want to get involved or start something similar. Lots of different options here about things like structuring, and like you're saying, it can be very different in some cases. But I was just wondering, like, how is the Open Food Network structured in general?
Yeah. So it's a sociocracy, which means that we are a non-hierarchical governance structure. Um, each country has uh, the option to deploy the software and to manage the actual governing structure of the software in a way that suits that country. We have 9 core global values, one of which is the value of subsidiarity, which means that decisions should be made at the most local level possible. So each country has freedom to design the way it's structured, but then within each country, we encourage the hubs themselves to decide how they want to use the software, to make their own plans. Some of them are not-for-profit hubs, some of them are private businesses using the platform to build, farmers markets or food hubs or whatever. And as long as they conform to our 9 core values, then we're really happy for them to use the platform in whatever way they like. The sociocracy is a way of governing that involves each the UK team, which is a very small team, has a support circle, so a group of people who support the users. It has a finance circle that manages all the finance. It has a communication circle, and each circle will have a purpose and will have a remit, will have a level of authority about making decisions. And then there'll be a coordination circle that will pull together each circle to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. And that sociocratic structure is replicated across in each 22 countries, there'll be a similar circle structure. And then globally, there will be a stewardship circle, there will be a finance circle, there'll be a development circle, software development circle. And so there is this sort of nested structure of circles with people taking leadership within those circles according to their experience and according to their capacity, but with no leader in terms of a hierarchy.
Yeah, this has been going strong for 12 years now. So
Mm.
clearly something's working. How many people are
It-
involved at this point?
How many people?
Yeah. Can you even
Uh,
say?
yeah. So in the UK, we are a team of 7, all part-time. All of us have other jobs, mostly around farming and growing. In each country, there will be a similar team. Some countries much smaller than others. Um, the global community is made up of representatives from each country. Not all 22 countries participate because some of them are so small that all they can do is just get their heads down and get the software deployed. They can't necessarily get involved in global decision making. Um, but I'd say, across the world. I mean, depends how to count the number of people involved, because the beauty of open source software is that anybody can contribute an idea to it. So imagine a really highly skilled, highly paid software developer working for a merchant bank or a management consultancy earning a big, big salary, but really disillusioned with what they're doing. They have no sense of contributing to anything meaningful. At the weekend or in the evenings, they will go looking for something useful to do. And some of those people will come to the Open Food Network and say, I've got these skills, what can I do to help? And they will give some of their time for free because they believe in what we're doing. They believe they want a better food system for the world. So if you count those people, there's probably hundreds of people who contribute to the platform. But in terms of paid staff, I guess globally something like 50.
Yeah, I guess that's a testament to the fact that people are motivated by a sense of ethics or just doing something right. Is the fact that you're not really able to answer cleanly. If you were able to say, "Oh, I can say exactly who," it's just okay. There are more people than that because everyone just thinks this is a great idea. I want to get involved. I don't care about getting paid if I'm able to contribute to something meaningful, and that means you can't keep track of it all. It's out of your hands, and that's what you want it to be, right?
Exactly, exactly. And what I notice is that there's a basic human need to look after each other and to do good things. That humans fundamentally, I might sound very idealistic saying this, but I believe that humans fundamentally want to look after each other and to do the right thing. And when they see a
Yeah.
project like this, then they're drawn to it.
I'd agree with you. I've been reading around the subject a lot, coming from an ecology and also like agroecology background. There's a lot of research on why people do things that, if you think of things in financial terms only, just don't make any sense. Like, why are you doing that for free? And it's like, well, it's because there are other things that we prioritize. We have a sense of morality and a sense of justice and what's right in the world, and we'll happily lose money doing things that we think are the right thing to do.
Yeah.
That takes us really well to the next string of questions, which will be looking towards the future and how the Open Food Network fits into an ecosystem of broader initiatives, a very large scale, forward looking view. And to very broadly start, what are your ambitions with the project?
Oof.
Can you even summarize that?
Um, I am increasingly, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd have had very strong views about, yeah, replacing the supermarket system, giving farmers and growers much, much more um, respect and position in terms of their power in the food systems. Um, as I get older and more worn down by the mainstream system, I my ambition is that people will find something in this phenomenon, which is greater than the software. It's this knowledge base, but they will find something in this phenomenon that inspires them to do something locally, and that they will that there'll be a widespread global uprising of initiative across a very large number of people that will be a sort of groundswell of change. I don't think any one individual person or certainly or even any one individual organization like the Open Food Network is going to make a change. I think it will facilitate a change when people are ready, when people realize that we need a better way of living, a better way of working, a better way of working together. And they will then find tools like the Open Food Network and they will use them to make a difference. I'm not, I've given up on changing the world. I'm just doing the right thing, I think, and hoping that other people will use these tools to do what they think is the right thing.
I think that's a pretty sensible approach. Putting a lot of pressure on yourself to try and change the world is mostly going to exhaust you because, as you're saying, it's more than just you that needs to get on board, and it's a matter of trying to get ideas and tools out into people's hands and get them to start using them. And when you're saying you're being worn down, yeah, it wears down everyone, and you've done something very noble, which is not give up and still try to do something. Where do you think we're headed, just broadly? Is it do you envision a sustainable, common-based world, or just complete disaster? Or you just I'm not going to touch that subject. Yeah, what do you think?
I think they're both possible. Um, I focus on the former. I focus on the possibility that we will turn this thing around. Um, and in order to carry on doing the work that I'm doing, I need to believe that that is possible, and that the more we do this kind of thing, and the more of us who start to work in this way, the more likely that is. Um, but uh, it's almost impossible to ignore the other possibility that it's all that we are going to self-destruct. And if that's how it needs to be, then that's how it needs to be. But I have to believe that there is a possibility that we still have a chance to make it better.
Yeah. So you would say that believing in that chance is fundamental to what you're doing. Like even though if you might have an awareness of potential disasters, like believing that something can be done is absolutely necessary to at least try something. Would
Yeah,
you agree with
yeah,
that? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning if I didn't believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the sort of more negative side, I guess you mentioned being worn down. So, what kind of barriers is the Open Food Network facing? And have you managed to overcome them, or there's some that are just sticking around and causing problems?
Okay, so the basic problem is that we're throwing ourselves into a very unbalanced problem, which is the problem we started this conversation with, that the global food systems are broken, which means that the people at the bottom, the farmers and the growers, are very, very financially constrained. They have very little disposable income to build better food systems with. So we can't charge very much for the use of our software, which means that we have very little financial input. So we're very dependent on external funding, and we're very fortunate that over those 12 years we have had enough funding to carry on improving and building this platform. Um, the other problem is a wider sort of societal issue of the capitalist model that does have venture capital funders who will fund proprietary software systems that look incredibly glitzy and incredibly slick and have a big marketing budget, and promise a lot to these farmers and growers, and then burn out. But it does mean that in the meantime, because we are open source, because all of our code base is visible and people can copy it, and because people can access our customer base, that we do lose users to these new startups because they come along and promise the world, and the farmers and the growers then go to them and work with them for as long as the software is available. And then we have to struggle to get new users and so on. And then, 6 months, 2 years later, that software blows up or is withdrawn or the funding stops. And many of those farmers and growers and food hubs will really struggle when their software that they're depending on disappears. That's, causes them quite big problems. So quite a few food hubs have gone out of business because they were using proprietary software that was then withdrawn. So yeah,
Uh,
it's not an easy world.
yeah, I guess it's in a way the way people think of crocodiles or sharks have being in an evolutionary sense a very similar body plan, and so all this other stuff is going on, all these other things, dinosaurs, etc., and you're just like, yeah, I'm still here, yeah, I'm still here, and trying to just get people on board and stick around and not chase after this new thing that's come up that's probably going to implode. But you have that assurance, I guess, of you've been around through all of this, and maybe people will start to realize, like, maybe I shouldn't jump ship because that doesn't seem to turn out very well when people do
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. Just to finish off, how can we collaborate at growing the commons in you, but also how can people help or even replicate what you're doing? Is there space for agricultural commons to start using Open Food Network, or are there
Yeah,
other potential?
yeah, lots of potential. So yeah, anybody who is interested in either selling their food directly to eaters and buyers, they're very welcome to use the platform. We can stick hopefully put some links onto this recording at the end so people can follow those links. Um, if anybody's interested in then maybe not farmers and growers themselves, but they want to build local food systems, then if you're interested in the idea of setting up a hub that would make all of your local food providers visible online and then distributing that food using our software, then we can put some links in there about how to set up a food hub. Um, I'm also interested in the wider sort of connection because obviously food is just part of the ecosystem, and there'll be other people interested in the commons who will be wanting to develop similar community-owned infrastructure. So the Open Food Network is broadening. There is now an open flour network, flour growers using the Open Food Network. There's also people using it for textiles, so growing hemp and distributing textile-based products. There's also an open timber network using the platform to distribute wood and wood fuel products. So there's lots of options for using this platform in different ways to distribute different products. But I think probably what the biggest way we can sort of cooperate and collaborate with the wider commons movement is that knowledge base. So a lot of the learning that has come out of using this platform, I think, is transferable in terms of community building, in terms of how to engage a wider population across racial difference, across social difference, across political, cultural differences. There's a lot of work going on locally within the Open Food Network on how to build community, and maybe we could share some of that knowledge and some of that experience with other commoning projects.
All right, wonderful. If people want to get that knowledge or keep up to speed, is there a best way of doing that? Would it be the website, or maybe some of the links that we'll put in the description, or is there another way?
Yeah. Okay. So, assuming that you're listening to this in the UK, then yeah, openfoodnetwork.org.uk. Go to the About page, and all the links will be there. If you're in another country, go to openfoodnetwork.org. That is the global website, and on there are links to each of the 22 different countries. Each country will do different things in different ways. The Open Food Network has a newsletter sign up. There are social media links that we can put in there for the UK instance. But yeah, and the other way of doing it is to email. So in the UK, hello@openfoodnetwork.org.uk. The global email is hello@openfoodnetwork.org. So those are probably the best ways to tap into the network.
All right, wonderful. And before we end, is there anything that I've missed that you'd like to talk about? Because we've covered quite a broad spectrum of zooming out to the whole global food system to concepts of open source software. So there are a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah, just to build on that last point I made about community building and bridging differences. One of the projects that we are going for funding for at the moment is called The Power of Food. And this is based on a concept that we have noticed over those 12 years that when people come together to grow food together, harvest food together, process food together, cook food together, and then probably most importantly to eat food together, they start to have a connection that can resolve some of the differences and some of the polarization that we're starting to see in our society. So I'm very frightened by the rise of the far right and the rise of fascism and the whole othering that seems to go on in the wider political sphere. And what I'm noticing happening in these local community food enterprises is that there is a real sense of common need. We all need food. Food is like a basic need. And if we can come together around that food, somebody talked to me the other day about the etymology of the word compassion, which means actually to break bread together, to come together, to companionship is about
companion,
about breaking bread together. And that if we can bring people together across differences and start to look at our common needs and to talk about our common needs and to talk about the history of our needs. So, people will have different recipes that their great grandmother used to make a particular recipe, and to talk about where did that come from and what's the history of that. And this can form much more long-lasting bonds than than arguing across a political divide about the rights and wrongs of, government policy. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well, I think, yeah, that's a really inspiring note to sort of leave us off on. And I'm excited to see both what Open Food Network does and then other spin-off ideas that might be connected. And I think your ideas here around community building related to food networks are vindicated in being proved right by people who are trying it. I was just watching a documentary, The Last Farm in Amsterdam, last night, which is about trying to build a food park on sort of the last green space and how it really brought a community together in a way that just arguing about politics wouldn't necessarily. So thank you so much, Nick. It's been really great talking to you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I'd highly encourage everyone to check out the Open Food Network website. So that's openfoodnetwork.org.uk for people in the UK, and then it's just .org if you're in the rest of the world. And I'll put links to everything in the description. And thank you. See you maybe in the future.
Good. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.